Well, I'm really excited to introduce you, and thank you so much for taking your time to be here today. So, as I was just telling everybody, Dr. Ben and I just jumped on a Zoom call because I just wanted to find out, like, what are some good questions to ask. And as we got talking, we actually talked Jesus. And I just like, I feel so blessed to have had that conversation with you. Who would have thought I was coming on Talk About Fix, and just you poured so much wisdom into me. And I just want to thank you for taking that time for me. And I'm so excited to bring you to our audience and for you to share, because you are a little bit famous around Fix, just so that you know. Yeah, you are. Everybody always talks about Dr. Ben Bowers' videos, and we have them pinned in here, and we send everybody to your stuff. But to have you live is just like, I'm so grateful. So thank you so much. So Dr. Ben Bowers, I'm going to let him share a little bit more about himself, but he's been 40 years in functional medicine. He's a 40-year functional medicine doctor. He studies that he's an epigenetics cyst or whatever, and he is a DNA specialist. I told him earlier, I'm not a science girl at all. so,
Yep,
I feel very privileged to have you. And I'm just gonna, you know what, I'm gonna give it over to you. Whatever it is you feel like you want to share with there's about 7,000 people, maybe 8,000 people in here now.
okay.
It's growing by probably 300 to 400 people a day in this
Wow.
group. It's
Praise the
a
Lord.
private testimonial group, and we're just sharing what Fix is doing in people's bodies. And everybody, unlike me, they want to know how it works.
Okay,
I just want to know that it works,
sure.
but everybody wants to know the how. And so thank you so much for coming on here. I'm just going to let you share whatever it is that you want to share about it.
Cool. And you can hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you really good. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. I'm, as she said, I'm Dr. Ben Bowers. Little history of me, been in healthcare over 40 plus years. I've been a educator as well as an actual practitioner. I've written so many different books for doctors, so many different protocols, taught functional medicine for going on 30 some years, part of the original group that when we initiated here in the States. Little backstory there. There's a reason, and I talked about this the other day on one of the calls that we did with the Winter's Edge podcast, is when you have a passion or a reason why you do something, that seems to be a directive or a guide for you, right? And that was my case, all right? I had some health issues and health family issues. And so I had to try to understand how God created what he created in this body. So that's kind of been my passion, is to dive into the why. People all the time, my wife used to call me the 2-year-old doctor, because I'd go, why? Why does it do that? Why doesn't it do this? Why? And so with an inquisitive mind like that, I had to dive in and understand systems, right? And when we talk about the human body, there's over 1,100 different systems of the body. And so as I pursued these things, I just constantly said, Lord, give me understanding. Why did you create the body to do this, or how, or what's it supposed to do? And so in the process of that, when we started functional medicine, my concept was, why is the body dysfunctional? So I tell my patients and clients all the time, why did your body show up the way it showed up? Why have you arrived at this state in your life, right? Whatever that health side is, okay? So that's kind of where I come from. I've written so many different books. I've written so many different programs for blood and DNA and stool and saliva and urine, and I've just taught these principles to doctors all around the world, literally thousands and thousands of doctors, right? And so much so that when I do like these international symposiums and doctors run these cases they can't understand, they send people to me and I get to try to figure out what it is. So that's my back history. That's where I come from. I'm 68 years of age. I'm semi-retired now. I'm out of active in-office practice. I basically just do telemedicine or phone calls all around the world with people in these tough cases, and we help figure them out. Okay. So that's kind of the phase where I was at last year. And one of my good lifelong friends from high school away called me up, kind of like you guys. Somebody's going to send you a link or something and say, hey, got something I want you to check out. And I just said, hey, bud, I love you, but I'm way past that. I don't want to do that stuff anymore. I'm pretty content where I'm at. And he says, hey, man, we've been friends for years and you kind of owe me. And I said, don't you pull that friend card out on me. That's not fair either, So they said, well, I said, my wife has these issues and you've been treating her and I want to see if this would be beneficial for her. Would you at least check it out for her? I mean, you dirty rat. That wasn't fair. So I said, well, okay, when's the meeting? He told me when it was. I go, sorry, bro. I said, I have a granddaughter who's got a baseball game that night. I have to go to that. I said, maybe next time. I thought I'd put him off. Well, as God have it, I was telling Nikki the stories, God would have it, I got there and the baseball game got over 45 minutes early. Their team just smashed it, a 10-run rule, and the game's over. And so I'm sitting there and getting ready to leave, and I'm about halfway toward where this meeting was going to be. And so I feel like the Holy Spirit said to me, says, yeah, you need to go to that meeting tonight. And I thought, hey, no, I don't want to do this. Long story short, I ended up going anyway. One of my patients was actually there. I got to meet Byron. Didn't know who he was, but he had recognized me from an earlier intervention with some people. And so I sat there and I listened to all this, and I'm going, yeah, they don't even have the product. They're just trying to tell me what things say they are going to do, or what this drug company said it would do. And not that I don't trust drug companies or distrust drug companies, but I'm a research guy. I co-own a research company, and we do the research of research, and that's how we come up with all of our different protocols. And so I left that night. I thought, sure, I'm glad to get out of here. And so I thought, well, I'll just call my friend and say, I don't think it's something you ought to do. And as I was leaving out of this ranch and driving back toward Wichita, I just felt like the Holy Spirit said, you need to go home and study this. I went, what? I thought we had this agreement. We weren't going to do stuff like this anymore. So long story short, I get home, go to my office, pull up my computer, and I start researching mature hops extracts. And I find all the original research that they referenced all the way back into the 50s. I even found some into the 30s, 1930s, right, where they were looking at what the concept was between people who drank beer. One of two things they started noticing: people either started growing in size, right, or people started losing weight. And I sat there and I thought, well, that's interesting. I've never seen an obese alcoholic. Okay, well, that is something unique. So as I started going into the research, I found the original research in 1953. I went through all that. I found more research in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s and the 2000s, all the way up to 2014, all the way up to 2018. So as I studied all this research, am I okay? We're still okay?
Just getting my charger because I'm
Yeah.
dying.
Okay, so as we got in, that may not be a bad idea. I may have to end up doing that to mine as well. But anyway, so I did all this research and I started looking at all of it. And I'm going, okay, there's something unique about this. And so as a functional medicine guy, here's what I started looking at. Excuse me. I thought they're saying that this is a fat burner, right? And I identified the process of why it was a fat burner. So let me just kind of walk through that really quick. What I actually dove into, again, in my why do things work, I said, okay, if this thing burns fat, how does it do it, right? So I went into the cholecystine kinase, I went into the pantothenic kinase, went all these different enzymes that actually help us go through what we call the fatty acid denaturase synthase. I started looking at all these concepts that we look at, from the body's utilization of what fat is, why it's there, what it does, and then how we burn it, all those concepts. And so when I realized, all right, I understand the storage capacity, I understand utilization capacity, I understand what we call the gluconeogenesis pathway, how all these things change, but how do we trigger to burn it, right? And I knew that was inside the liver. And so as I started back tracing all these steps, or what I call reverse engineering it, all right, if this is a thermogenic reaction, what causes that thermogenesis? Right? And so I know what thermogenesis is. It's basically when your body is feeling like you're under attack with something. Most people understand that as being out in the cold, right? And you shiver, right? That's a thermogenic reaction. And so the body will convert this fat into something that is going to give an energy for something, right? So I backtracked that all the way up into the stomach. I backtracked that up through the alimentary canal, the digestive pathway, the esophagus, all the way up into the mouth, all the way into the tongue, all the way up to the brain. And keeping that part all simple. So that's just to tell you why I ended up where I ended up to. I said, let's look at what we call the bitter sensors. So let me explain what all this is. The bitter sensors is kind of like a thermostat of sorts, right? And not a thermostat, a thermometer. It says, hey, things are starting to change here in our environment, and we need to notify somebody. So the bitter sensors then sends a signal to what's called the bitter receptor, and the bitter receptor then says, okay, I received your message. I'm going to go upstairs and tell the brain what's happening. So the brain goes up there, and we hit into a certain portion of the brain, and the brainstem, and says, okay, we have a potential problem here. So it's going to send a signal down into the stomach, and it's going to trigger a brown adipose tissue. That's going to go trigger this thermogenic reaction that says we're under attack and we need fuel right now. Right? So let me stop there and explain something. I ask people all the time, why do we eat? They go, you silly doctor. You got to eat because you're hungry. I go, well, we eat for three reasons. We're going to have a party. We're going to have a celebration. We're going to have an emotional issue. But we only eat for energy. It's like, when do you fill up the gas tank in your car? When you're starting to get low on fuel, right? And so when you're really low, a light comes on, starts flashing, something starts dinging. That's what we call hunger pangs, right, inside the body. So when we look at that, what people don't understand, or most people don't understand, is every time you eat, we have what's called an adiposity index, which means you have to save at least 10 to 30% of what you eat for later. Now, what's the later? The later is, why do we sleep? We sleep because we have to repair and regenerate. Well, how do you repair and regenerate if you don't have fuel to fuel the source or to fuel the repair? So think of a power tool, or in this case, like Nikki just did, think of your phone as a tool. If you lose charge, you're not going to get communication. You're not going to be able to function or do anything in your business because your phone just went dead. It's kind of what happens when we sleep. Most people that travel a lot have seen at nighttime, they have all these big lights out there and construction crews are working on the roads at night. Why? It's safer. There's not much traffic. They can get more things done. But if they don't have power for light, they can't see what they're doing. If they don't have power for their equipment, they can't operate. Well, that's what happens when we sleep. The body goes into this repair regenerative mode, and it has to have fuel to do that. So every time we eat, 10 to 30% of it is stored to be burned while we're sleeping, right? So when I looked at that phase and I come back into our story now, what the thermogenic reaction does, it's going to give us fuel to fix something, right? So now let's change that tone and add one more lever to that. If we were to consume some sort of a poison, something that was poisonous to our body, what we understand in nature, everything that's poisonous to the body has a bitter context to it. And we've all tasted something that was bitter, drank something that was bitter, tasted nasty, and we spit it out. That's what those bitter sensors and the bitter receptors force us to do that. But if you happen to swallow it, right, and it goes all the way down into your stomach, the brain's going to override your normal ability, and it's going to shut your stomach valve off. We call that pyloric sphincter. It shuts it off. Then it's going to take the brown adipose tissue to burn the visceral adipose tissue, which is your white stored fat around your organs, and it's going to melt it. It's like you take a stick of butter, you put it in a pan, and you put it on the stove, it just melts it, right? Now, fat is the largest component in the body, but it's not the heaviest component. So when we look at what happens with that fuel that gets melted, now all of a sudden you have enough energy to trigger the immune system to tear everything apart inside that stomach, looking for the poison, right? And once it finds the poison, it now has enough armies to break that down. So I go back and tell people, if we eat for energy, there's 3 types of energy. We eat when we're awake because we need now energy. We need energy to fuel us through our day, right? We also then eat for what we call firemen, right? So if we have an inflammatory reaction in our body, you stub your toe, you get a sticker in your finger, a sliver or something like that, or you get a bee sting, a wasp sting, you have an inflammatory reaction, and we need fuel to feed our firemen to go put out the fire, inflammation. Number 3rd type of energy we have is you have soldiers, or you have armies, if you will, in your body, that they go fight all foreign invaders that are called viruses, bacteria, fungi, parasites, heavy metals, toxins, drug toxicities. Whenever there is an attack coming on your body, that's what the immune system has to have enough energy to fight. And a lot of different divisions in there, like we have in the military, we have the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, et cetera, whatever. So when we look at what this energy is going to do, and this brown adipose tissue goes into the thermogenic reaction and melts all this white adipose tissue, now we have enough fuel to fuel every aspect of our body, right? And that's what this actually does, right? When we talk about this mature hops extract, and we look at the flower of the hops flower, and we break it down into 2 major categories. There's one side called the phenolinics. You don't have to know all these words, but there's a division that does a lot of hormone control, does a lot of antioxidants, does a lot of other factors over there, and those are very beneficial. And we've used those for 15 or 20 years in our practice. But on the BA, or the bitter acid side, there's 3 major categories. They are the alpha, the beta, and the gamma elements, right? They have multiple substrates underneath them. And so when we look at what fix is and what fix does, it turns on those bitter receptors to go to the brain, hit the vagus nerve, to go down and shut off the pyloric valve, then to go into the brown adipose tissue and actually melt all this fat around there and actually start making that do some work, right? So as a physician, when I looked at this, I said, okay, I like all the research. I've done all the research. I've done all these things. I got to come up with a protocol of how I can use this in my practice. Because if I'm going to bring this to my clients or my patients, I'm going to say, hey, I think this will be good for you. I got to have something. I mean, patients love me or they'll trust me, right? But they know that I'm a researcher and they know I'm going to back it up and tell them why. So I look at this and I said, all right, here's the key concept. This is not weight loss in the traditional sense of the word, right? Why? Because weight is the total accumulative effect of the entire body. And we know that water weighs a lot, muscles weigh a lot, and bone weigh a lot, and all three of them weigh more than fat. So when someone goes on a diet, right, and they lose, 10, 15 pounds, we know the first 10 to 15 pounds is what we call water weight. The next 5 to 10 pounds is muscle weight, right? So somebody could actually go out and lose 20 to 25 pounds and never lose any fat. Isn't that amazing, right? So I looked at this and said, okay, if I'm going to bring this into my practice and I'm going to look at what's going to happen, I need to find ways to measure success. How do I do that? So what most people aren't aware of it as a functional medicine doc, I know that body stores fat in different areas for different reasons, for different places, for different times, right? So I said, okay, I'm going to identify 25 different places on the body to measure so I can watch the girth change. Because if this is a true fat emulsifier, right, or metabolizer or burner, right, I should start seeing these fats change. Now, we do have to understand a couple of key things about what fat is, right? Fat is more than just fat. I tell people there's two classes of fats, the brown adipose tissue and the white adipose tissue. But once the thermogenic reaction occurs, you'll take white fat and you'll turn it beige, right? And so this product, right, this hops extract is the one that's absolutely changed the scientific world to now understand the beiging fat aspect. It didn't exist more than 15 years ago, right? It existed. We just didn't have that concept to understand it. So when you hear some of these different people talk on different, videos or lives or whatever, or different talks or conversations, you'll hear them say that this is a paradigm shift. You'll hear them say this is a category creator. And what we mean by that is this has changed our understanding of why or how we burn fat. And since nobody has ever figured that out before, we're the first to market. We're the first to have this. This is a brand new category that nobody has understood before. This is literally changing things that we thought we understood in healthcare, right? Or in weight loss, or in fat emulsification, or fat management. So when we start understanding this, you got to understand a lot of this research has been around 10, 15 years, though it's not got out there into the world yet. We are the mouthpiece that are bringing all this out. And we have all the scientific research to back it up. And that's what's unique about it. Okay, so let's dive into fat here really quick, because when I first saw this, I looked at the fat emulsification. I said, okay, if I know this is going to change that, and I'm going to see where the body changes, where it places fat or where it burns fat, I can probably, with some great accuracy, determine what's wrong with that body. Right now, we look at obese people, and I don't mean to be crude to anybody, but I just want to have this understanding. When we look at fat and obese people, we think, they lack discipline. They don't control what they eat. They don't work out. They are probably just, a sloth, right? They're sitting around on the couch and just eating bonbons and whatever, No, it's not true, right? A lot of obese people don't have the ability to manage what's happening to their body, and not necessarily because they're obese. Because when we go into the research, and I went back and did the research back this in August, I brought all that out. And when we looked at America, right, which I know people probably watch around the world, but in America, some research came out in August that showed that 78.9% of adults between the ages of 20 and 90 were in one of 4 stages of obesity. That first stage is being overweight, right? And so So we look at people and go, well, they look healthy, right? If you looked at me right now, I'm a lot healthier than I used to look, right? I look like I'm overweight, and I am, but I'm also in stage 1 obesity, excuse me, stage 2 obesity, right? Which means that, a little story people don't realize, 25, 30 years ago, I was paralyzed, I was a quadriplegic, all the stuff I had to go through for 5 years, I was paralyzed, unable to move, and I gained 96 pounds in that time frame, right? On my body frame, from 170 pounds up to almost 290 pounds, right? In the totality of the over a year. So for 5 years I was there. Well, God in his miraculous ability allowed me to get over that, get through that, get healed and go through that. That's another whole story. But the process is, if you look at people that look like they're overweight, you think, well, they're pretty healthy. And what you don't understand is they're already in the downward slope of going toward illness, right? Now, why do I make that statement? Well, let's look at what fat is for and where fat is. First of all, understand that the brain itself and the brain stem and the spinal cord, which controls everything of the body, right? It's the mechanical, manageable aspect of the body. It's over 60% fat. Then if you look at the peripheral nervous system and the 7 branches of the peripheral nervous system, they're 80 to 85% fat. Then if you go into all the hormones, and there's discussion between 660 different key hormones, they're 90% fat. Then when you go into the master neurotransmitters that do control everything, they're 92% fat. So the brain, the nervous system, all the hormones, and even our bone itself is made up of fat. So when you look at the building blocks of the body, you say, okay, what do I need to become healthy? Well, I need fats, I need proteins, I need carbohydrates, and I need minerals. We talk about those as the macronutrients. But when you break down those fats and you start understanding that the body really is a body of fat, it prefers fat, it can store fat, and it can break fat down. Now we start understanding why, when I looked at all these things, I'm going, if I can change the metabability, all right, of fat, what is this going to do to the body? So I went and looked up all the different concepts of all the disease entities that are associated with fatty acids, or what we call free fatty acids. And I dove into the inflammatory side of that, meaning, okay, what's going on with inflammation? And when you understand it, that inflammation is the #1 cause of several hundred different diseases, but we really believe it's the initiation of all diseases, because when you get a fatty acid that becomes oxidized, you get what's called an oxidized low-density lipoprotein, and that is the key building block for every cell of the body. Every cell has both a fatty inside layer and a fatty outside layer, right? It's called the dual lipid biolipid layer, right? And when those fatty acids become rancid, they become putrefied, they become toxic, it now is going to start causing another problem. So real quick, like, there's a condition that's called chylomicronecrosis that's inside the bloodstream, and these cells, they coalesce together. And when they start becoming together, they become acidic, and they start tearing things apart. So we know that free fatty acid that has been oxidized is a primary stage of inflammation. And that inflammatory reaction is going to change everything in the body. So we went through all this. We identified all the different places to start measuring. And I knew, for example, if it was above the chest or breast, or below the chest or breast, above the belly button, at the belly button, below the belly button, at the hips, the thighs, I could figure out if girth was changing in those areas. I could predict what condition they did not even know they had, right? And so we call that potentiation. So as I looked at the fix, and I looked at the material hops extract and all these 3 bitter acids, I'm going, well, first of all, this is an initiator or an activator. It's not a stimulant. It's not an antagonist. It's not something that's going to change the normal dynamic of the body. It's going to step into the body and say, this is how things should work. So I called it the first domino, right? And if you correct the first domino and you get those pathways to start working, we're going to see massive changes occur in this body. So that's why I came back to Byron and I said, don't think you guys know what you have here, all right? But I'm going to watch it. So I came up as a functional medicine doctor. Said, all right, I'm going to ask a lot of different questions. I'm going to figure out how the patient's body or the client's body is responding. And at that point, I can make some determination of what the expectation of that is. So that's what we started with, right? So I took all these 40 questions, I did all these measurements, and we started watching it. And I started seeing what I call the miraculous or the freakish. I'm seeing things that you would never expect to happen. So when that would happen, I'd go back and trace out all down the systems going, Oh, I think I understand that pathway now. Okay. Well, let's fast forward 7 months later now, and 400 or 500 different people that I've observed and watched over all this. And I can give you a wide spectrum of why people get such erratic results, right? Now, erratic not necessarily to that body, but to the 96 different body types that are in the human race that we know about, what we call humanoids, right? So some people will lose weight. Most people won't at first. Some people will reduce inflammation and they'll get their stomach filled up faster. Some people will get more energy. Some people will get better cognition. Some people will have reduced menstrual cycles or menopausal effects or androgen effects in the men. We'll start seeing these muscle changes. I have professional athletes that we started watching their reactions, their body's ability to perform and function. So the hand-eye coordination improved, the VO max improved, their breathing improved, their stamina improved, their longevity improved, the ability to perform better for a longer period of time. All these things improved. So I just went through all these lists and just started watching all these different things that started happening. And that's when I got real excited. Now, I'm going to tell you at the beginning, I was cautiously excited because I saw all the potential that could happen, but I didn't know if it would work, right? And so I'm one of the things I do when I start something, I called up 4, 5, 6 of my friends and doctor friends and some family members and said, okay, we got a new thing. We're going to guinea pig ourselves. Well, most of my doctors know that in all the research I've done, I'll establish the protocols, I'll do all the monitoring, I'll publish my results, and then we'll go tell the world, right? And so they go, okay, we're going to do that. And I go, no, we're going to guinea pig ourselves and just get started. I feel like the Holy Spirit said, we're not going to do the way you normally do this. We're going to do this differently. So I did. So now let me go forward to 7 months later, right, and tell you that I am more excited now with what we have because I see even greater potential. And before, when I went through all the research, the maximum amount of research we had was 18 weeks, right? And this one research was really unique in that they monitor everybody for up to 18 weeks, and then they stopped the trial, but they followed up another 18 weeks and looked at the results, and then another 18 weeks and looked at the results. So we're talking about 9 to 10 months of here that they observed these people to see what happened, right? And the beauty of it, in contrast to all the other type of drugs that you can take that are for fat loss or weight loss, this had no side effects. It was not synergistic to any medication, any disease entity. And I tell people, no side effects, but many different benefits, right? Because now all of a sudden, all these people that they monitor over that 9 or 10 months that were only on it for 18 weeks, and I'll split that here in just a second, but they saw that within the first 18 weeks, less than 1% gained any of their weight back or their fat girth back. At the end of the second second observational 18 weeks, so 19 months later, less than 2.5% had gained any back. So that told me about the efficacy and the efficiency of the product. And once it turns on that brown adipose tissue and you get past what I'm going to call the flush mechanism, once you get past that and it starts becoming automatic, it's going to correct the systems in the body. So I got real excited. Look, I'm going to see what it is a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, from when people have been on this product. And then the remodeling of the body, all right, the reprogramming of the body, the reduction of all the inflammatory issues and the disease-causing processes, we're going to see a lot of things change. Now, we're seeing a lot of it in the first 6, 7 months, all right? But it's going to be interesting to see what happens a couple of years down the road. So let me touch on one other thing that I've been watching and observing. When I looked at all the people that I put on this product, and I saw, I'll give you the mathematical number here, about 22% of them were having problems at the beginning phases of it, right? So as I tore back into the research, I looked at all this stuff. You got to understand, I'm doing blood work on these people. I'm doing urine tests. I'm doing DNA tests. I'm doing breathing tests, saliva tests, all these different tests. So we know, and you also got to understand the people I'm dealing with are probably some of the sickest people around, because all these doctors are sending me all their sick people nobody can figure out. I tell you, but I have good ones too. But anyway, so as I'm tearing those apart and I'm understanding what's happening with these bodies, I'm able to discern what really is happening at the intracellular level, right? And so what I started seeing is that the people that seem to gain weight within the first couple of weeks, I was able to detect a higher level of inflammation. So we go in, we do their blood and their urine, we will run some different inflammatory markers, right? And when I watch those markers, they'll be 4 to 5 times off the normal reference range of the chart. I'm going, okay, What do we do? Some people, it's too much for them. It's kind of like they're trying to drink from a fire hydrant. So I backed the doses back down, and I kind of let their body clean up, and we brought them on a lot slower. Right now, that was just my natural intrinsic aspect of a functional medicine doctor in a more of a conservative approach than it was the research. That was at the beginning phase. Well, since then, I've gone back and looked at the research, and I tore apart it even deeper and understood that there was about 15 to 16% of the people that they did the research on didn't have any results within the first 2 to 4 weeks. Okay. So, okay. And they didn't have sick people. They just took people well, some of them just took people at large. Some of the other research took specifically healthy people that worked out and drank alcohol, right? So they kind of split all these different things up. But when I went back and looked at research where they just took people at large, I'm going, well, if you stop and look at large, and most of that research was in Japan, and less than 15% of the people in Japan were obese, right? So at large, that means about 15% of their trial of the people they used were probably obese. Oh, that's the 15% of the people that had problems, okay? So as I extrapolate that out, I'm going, okay. So we looked at that research, and once they kept those people on that product and they got them past the 6 to 8 weeks, then they started getting results, right? That was measurable or significant. So I kind of brought that back into my practice, into my trials and what I was doing. I'm going, okay, so I changed some of my parameters of people that I put on it. And so I began to ask them to give me 90 days, right? So I can measure and see what happened in 90 days. And sure enough, of those people that I put in that 90-day category, it took about 40-some% of them to get to what I call the flush. So let me explain the flush. When you put a person or person starts on this and it starts turning all these things on, the first thing this is going to do is go break down what we call the oxidized free fatty acids. Those are the inflamed or the rancid fats. And when you start breaking that down, it's going to release those toxins back into the body, and the body has to deal with it. Well, an unhealthy body is already having trouble, and so the body is going to push it out the breath, it's going to push it out the urine, it's going to push it out the skin, it's going to push out the bowels. But once you get that to flush out, and I started doing my research, I find most people somewhere between 7 to 14 days, right, about 6% of the people, within 7 to 14 days, they'll go through that flush, and then everything starts flowing. It's what we call motility in the body. Things start moving in the good pathway. So when I looked at the people that were gaining 5, 10, 15 pounds the first couple of weeks just being on this, and I went back and I said, well, that's the body bringing in a lot of fluid. Remember, weight is the highest level indicator of, water is the highest indicator of weight on the body. And it has to have fluid to clean all this stuff out, to make it flow. I tell people, think of a dirty pond, or what I call dirty pond scum, and a flowing stream. Well, if I brought a flowing stream in that dirty pond scum, eventually all the dirty pond scum would go down the stream, right? And would have clean, fresh water. Well, that's kind of what we're doing in the body. If I can get the flow to start moving and flush all that debris out, now the resistance is gone, right? But the reason I did all these different measurements in 25 different places, everybody, is I could identify where they were losing and where they were not losing. So for example, if they had an upper chest above the breast type of an issue, I knew it was a specific set of hormones that was in balance. Whether it's pregnenolone, pregnenolone, something like that. If it was right at the chest or the breast area and or the hip area, I could use the estrogen, estradiol aspect. I could figure out that phase of it, right? If it was above the belly button, I'd go into testosterone and cortisone. I could figure that one out. So as I did all these measurements, I was able to measure why the body was having trouble and where it was having trouble at. Now, here's a unique key about that. The person themselves did not know they had that problem. And so one of my postulations, right, was, and I said this earlier, I thought this was going to be an investigative tool that helped me find out what was wrong with the body by identifying where the body either burned fat or didn't burn fat. And when I got that part figured out, I'm going, okay, they have a lot of issues over there. So some of these people that, they tried it 2-4 weeks, gained 5 pounds, go, I'm going to quit this. I convinced them to stay on it and stay with it. And those cases, it actually took me about 10 to 14 weeks before we got the flushing done and the body started turning around, and all of a sudden we started getting great results. Now, one other thing about the research on that 18-week research, when they identified that some of the people didn't have what I'm calling the flushing within the first 6 to 8 weeks, by week 12 to 14, they caught up to everybody else within that 6 weeks. So once we flushed it out, now the massive results start happening to that body. So if I can get people to look at this and give it, now I'm going to say a 120-day or 4-month trial, which that would be a good trial, we're going to identify what's happening in this body, and we can actually help them figure out how they have to get well. They don't need a guy like me or a doc like me or somebody like me. They just stick with it long enough, and they're going to start eventually seeing those results. So as a side note, when I came back to the business side of this, and I asked people to give me a 90-day trial, and we allowed them to purchase it either at wholesale or retail. That's a whole different conversation. But at $300, they would do a 90-day trial, cost them $300. And so what we would simply say to them is, well, there is an opportunity if you buy this wholesale, you can save $60 if you want to do that, because you're buying the same amount anyway, right? And probably 80% of them did do that. Some didn't. No, I'll just pay retail, which is fine. But that was what was interesting. And I bring that in because when I started observing the psychological aspect of that, people who have an invested interest into something and they have a hope and a desire to have a better outcome, and I've told them that this is going to be 90 days before we see results, they're willing to buy that. Like, okay, I'll do that. I'll give it 90 days. And when I first started out, I said, hey, let's do this for a week or two and see what happens. But enough. So I'm encouraging everybody, when you're talking to people and you're trying to get them to get on this, don't just give them samples for a few days or a few weeks and see what this does. Make sure they have an invested interest into their health. One of the things I try to explain to everybody, we are our own physician, right? We control what goes in here. We control what body does as much as possible. So we are in charge of this temple of God, right? How do we take care of this temple of God? Yes, we can talk about gluttony as a sin. Yes, we can talk about all these other factors. And I'm not even going there. All I want to say is that sometimes because of emotions, we eat inappropriately, right? If we can look at this and we can start seeing that this will change us and we'll make that 90-day commitment, here's what's going to happen. So I had one of my clients and patients down in Dallas, Texas call me up. He says, hey, doc, he said, I need to ask you questions. Okay. He says, well, this changed the way I think. I went, okay, well, why do you ask that question? You know, he said, well, he's a 65-year-old man. He's single. He says, you know, I eat a lot of junk food. And he's an overweight guy, right? And he says, I drew by McDonald's and I was going to get my Big Mac, but as I got ready to order, something in my brain said, maybe I should order a salad instead. He said, so I did. I said, well, then what happened? He says, I went home and ate it. Okay, what happened next? Well, I was sitting on the couch watching TV and I'm sitting there going, I should probably get up and ride my bike. I said to him, I said, when's the last time you rode your bike? Probably at least 15 years ago. I said, what'd you do? He said, I got and rode my bike. I said, okay, what happened next? He goes, I did that 3 days in a row. I said, interesting. So as a DNA specialist and epigeneticist, we go back into what I call the brain neuroplasticity of the brain. And when I started tearing apart his DNA and I started looking at it, I'm going, he has a blockage in his brain. Now, we call that a single nucleotide polymorphism or heterozygous homozygous abnormal variant. And I look at it, I go, he has, for people who never heard me before, I talk about there's a bridge that's out, right? He had a bridge that was out. And all of a sudden, this product is going in and breaking down the glial iosis that's inside his brain, which is the inflammation inside the brain, and it's breaking it down to where now when he has a thought, it doesn't have to go, you know, around. It can go over where the bridge was missing, and it'll have a different reaction. It'll have a different thought process. Okay, this is interesting. So I went back and started asking those types of questions and more of my clients, my patients, and it became pretty amazing to me that it does change the way we think. Now, I'd already knew it changed mood, it changed hormones, it changed emotions, because people just felt better. They go, I just feel stronger, I can think better, I can recall better, I'm having better clarity, I'm having better ability to communicate. I didn't connect those yet until after this one call. So then I went back, started asking all these questions. And here's what I find interesting. People are going back to their God-given ability to make better choices. So I do think it helps, not everybody, because more people have issues. I have a lot of people have brain tumors and, you know, strokes and a lot of, you know, issues in the brain that we are dealing with, right? Some were born that way, some were created that way, some are, you know, have accidents, have traumas. But it's interesting as I'm watching all these things, like seizures is a big factor. We're seeing a lot of seizures reduce because you're changing the structure of the body. You're actually getting better communication of the systems of the body. And once we do that, there is this, what we call the innate ability of the body. It knows what to do. And so as I expressed this guy in Texas, it was his innate ability coming out, making better choices. Hey, maybe I should do this instead of that. And now that man's done very, very well, lost a lot of weight, doing a lot of things happening. So just kind of wrapping all this up, Nikki, and some of this stuff. But when I looked at all these components that was happening in the body, and again, and back in June and July when we first got the product, we didn't have much knowledge of that, right? We had some research we could go dive into and tear apart, right? But now that we got, 40,000 people in this product, we're hearing all these stories, and I mean, phenomenal stories and testimonies. I know this, that when a person is willing to want to change their body, right? I tell people don't really care how much they weigh. Now they do, but they really don't. They care how they look and how they feel. And if we can help people start feeling better, looking better, right, that gives them the intuitiveness or the desire to want to get better. And I think that's one of the things we talk about: monoamine oxidase A and B. We talk about the catecholamines, these things inside the brain, and how it's changing that dynamic and turning back on that God-given innate ability. I think people are choosing to get better. Mm-hmm. So people are just sick and tired of being sick and tired. But everything they've tried hasn't worked. And we all know people, yeah, they got on this drug or they did this diet, they did wonderful, but I tried it, nothing happened, right? Whatever's unique to this body, this is one of the main building points of each body, building blocks. And when we get rid of that inflammatory fatty acid side and we start turning on the healthy side, and once you get past that flushing mechanism, we start gaining ground. I tell people it's kind of like sliding down a hill. Once you stop sliding and you turn around, the biggest thing is turning around and moving back up. But once you get inertia and you start moving, and the higher up you get, the less resistance you have, the easier it is to continue to get well. So that's kind of what I'm looking at in the long-term aspect of people being on this product. And is this the panacea or the miracle elixir for everything? No, it's not. But it's a major initiator. It's what we're going to call the first punch in the whole thing, right? This is what's going to start things moving. Now, we can bring other things along to help. And yes, there's going to be a lot of these bodies that have a lot of different conditions that's going to need other factors to help it. But right now, this is the first thing. I tell people when a rocket leaves the Earth, 80% of its fuel is needed to go 1 inch. 1 inch. 80% of it. Right? Then it starts taking less and less, and it gains. But to break the inertia of gravity, right, it takes most of that fuel. I think that's what this is. I think this is our inertia breaker, if you will. It's what takes us out of disease and an unhealthy lifestyle, and it turns that around. We jokingly say this in the spiritual world. What does the word repent mean, right? Repent means simply turn around. So as my father taught me when I was a young man, he says, Ben, no matter how far north you're walking, the moment you turn around, you're no longer walking north, you're headed south. It doesn't matter where you are on the earth, the moment you turn around, right, and you go a different direction, it can expect a different result. And that's what Fix does. It turns us around, and now we start moving toward a healthy direction instead of continuing down that downward slope on an unhealthy direction. So that, Miss Nikki, I'm going to turn back over to you, young lady.
Well, okay, so I just learned so much, and I've listened to you so many times, but I just heard some things very differently today. And I just want to thank you, Dr. Ben, for coming and doing this today, because so many my purpose of this group, and I've been doing a lot of live live videos, is that I really want people to know that this is not an overnight fix, that there is things that are happening in the body, that because we all get those phone calls, it's been a week and I haven't lost any weight, or it's been a week and I've gained, or whatever. And so my deepest desire is for people to actually get healthy. This group is called Fix Your Health, not Fix Your Weight, not fix your,
Right.
It's called Fix Your Health. And so there was a purpose for me naming it that, is that I really want people to understand the longevity that they want their body to have. And so having you explain this today, I am not a science girl. I'll tell everybody. I didn't even know until 2 weeks ago what M matured hops extract MH,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
H-E.
Yeah, I didn't know
M-H-E.
what it stood for. I was like, why is somebody saying that? Like, it's like, what is that? We're not advertising other products. What's going on here?
Right.
So, but I do know health, and I do understand that we need that God has given us one body,
Mm-hmm.
and it is the temple, and that we are to take care of it. And
Right.
so, having all these people in this group coming to look at fix and understanding it, and a lot of people in here that are already on it, that's really where my focus wants to be, is like, how can we really take care of this one body that God has given
Yeah.
us to the best that we
Right.
can. And I had no idea, just like you, that fix would drop on my lap, and it would be something that we would
Right.
share with the world, but we have this opportunity to share it with the world. And I feel so blessed. And I feel so blessed to have you come today and share
My
all your
pleasure.
words of wisdom, all that research, all that studying that you have done, to come and to impart that on all of us today. I just want to thank you so much for doing
You're
that.
welcome.
And if there's anything that you want to finish with, please do. And then we'll end it here.
Okay. I just want to encourage people that there is a better hope, right? No matter how bad we look at life, and I explain to people, it's never too late to start, right? I'm 68, right? It's never too late. I have 2-year-olds on this product, right? All the way up to
Mm.
87-year-olds on this product, right? And it's working. If we take it long enough, I tell people, if we get out of the way and let God's creation go back to its creative concept, right? And we call that neogenesis within the body. It's the body's ability to repair and regenerate. If we let the body do what it knows to do, and we give it the right fuel, the right raw ingredients, I tell people, this isn't fix everything in that sense. We still have to be careful in what we eat. We still have to make sure we get up and move. We still have to make sure we get good, ample sleep. We still have to hydrate, right? All these things we still have to do. There's a whole lot of things we can add to that. But if we understand it's not too late, and as long as we have time and we do our due diligence, I mean, how hard is it to put a dropper in our liquid, or fold a snap in half and put it in our liquid, or on our salad, or in our potatoes, or on our hamburger, or whatever you're going to put it on, and let that do its job. At 400 calories per hour, if you'll do this, it happens. And just one other thing, I've been doing some experimenting. You guys will be the first ones I've actually shared this in this detail with. But I have a lot of people that we talk about, this really fixes their sleep, and it does for a lot of people. But for the people that don't, I actually have them take a dose at bedtime. And it's
Okay.
amazing how they are getting a totally different style of sleep. Because you stop and think about it, we need fuel to repair. And if they have an imbalanced ability to convert that stored fatty acid tissue for repair while they're sleeping, and I give it to them at bedtime and it speeds all that up, they're sleeping like babes. I mean, it's amazing what some of these
Wow.
people, probably about 70, 80% of the ones I'm doing so far, that's the results we're giving.
Wow.
So it's not too late. It's not too late. This is a beginning tool. It's an investigative tool for the body, not for us, because we've seen what's done with all the research. But it's going to do what we don't even know we have a problem with. It's going to go out and help fix that. So I just want to encourage everybody. You, first of all. Second of all, your loved ones. Third of all, people around you. Anybody that you love. This is, I say it's in a funny way, it's a ministry tool, meaning you can go minister health unto people,
Yeah.
right? You have the ability with this to go share that. And if you can change change your family, change your circle of influence, and they start doing that, look at the ripple effect that this will do, right? In North America, 8 out of 10 people, 40.7% of the kids between 2 to 19 years of age are obese, or overweight to obese. That's unhealthy. That's sickness, okay? If we can do that, guess what we change? We change our lives, we change the circle around us, we change our community. Because what is one of the most frustrating things in our world? The state of frustration. And when I'm watching this unwind out with people, and they're happier, they're easier to get along, they're not as emotional, not as angry, that's a dynamic that we can change our world. And for such a time as this, here we are.
Yeah.
We are called to go do this. So I just want to encourage everybody. There's a lot of hope, right? So God bless, and go profit.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Dr. Ben.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
just thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks everybody for joining. Tag anybody on here that you think could use this information, and have a wonderful day.
God bless.
God bless.